Hi everybody, welcome back to our HTML review series here. Today the first thing we're going to talk about is our div tag. Div is one of those tags that's a little bit hard to understand because it really kind of doesn't do anything by itself. The reason that it's used is that it's used to group elements together. So what I want you to consider is some of the things that we use. I have Google Keep here, and this is a great example of why you might use div. So what modern web design does is it groups things together, and we want to be able to take and we want to be able to drag elements and move elements to different spots and reorder them and do all this stuff without having to change the HTML. And the reason that div is so prevalent in modern web design is it allows you to go and group things together, like for example a list and a heading and a little bar of icons, and make that just one group that then you can resize and move and recolor and just edit by itself as one group, as opposed to having to change all of the different groups on a page. So div allows us to do that and group that one thing together. So as always, if you have a little bit of, if you want to go back and review, you've forgotten a little bit about what the div tag is, you can always go to W3 Schools. Their description of this is not great, but it does show you some examples of what you would want to do or how you might do it. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to do a little bit of that now. So inside of your Schoology, I should have posted a new version of the CSS or HTML skeleton. And what I've done is that I've just given you all these HTML elements and CSS elements that allow you to go ahead and write your code without having to do all the setup work. The page setup for our pages is going to be generally the same each time, and I don't want you to have to redo this each time. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to post that in there for you so you can just go ahead and reuse what we've already done in previous videos. I've added all the CSS that we need up here just as general, so you can just go ahead and you can change any of these particular elements that you would like, and it should be wonderful. So let's go ahead and we're going to put our div tag on here, and all of our code, remember, goes in this container right here, which I actually have this div tag here. I've created essentially this container to be our main section of the document. So div, as we're doing here, is a container for other things. That's how we'll treat that. Inside of this, you can put multiple things. So I'll put H3, C. We'll say my div tag, and then you can put a paragraph tag inside of it. And you can just put just some text. It doesn't even matter in this case. Inside of div, you can put images. You can put a lot of different things, lists, probably tables even, all those different things. But we're just going to go basic right now. So div, generally speaking, you're going to use with other things. You almost never will just change things for your div tag in CSS. Which brings us to our class attribute. So you'll notice that I have a class of container. Our class for this one is going to be, we'll just call this one box. And we'll be able to call it good with that. So let's go ahead and let's style our box a little bit, because right now when you just put div on there, it's not going to look like a whole lot when you go and you preview it in your default viewer. I have all the general setup here. Please change my colors because they're not good. But div tag UC does not do a whole lot. It just essentially puts your text on unedited. It just is now grouped together. So let's go ahead and get back into it and do some CSS. So you notice this comment in CSS we have here. All of our page-specific CSS is going to go under there. So we have a class, dot box. So remember that the dot, the period in front of here, is our class selector that applies this CSS to everything with the class of box. So the first element that you have to do is the display. We want this to be displayed as a block for right now on our screen, so you treat it as just one chunk of text on there, or one chunk of one element. So background, will just so we can see what it is, put a background color of light green. And if we go ahead and toggle back to our display, you'll see that this box right here, this div box, takes up our entire line of the screen right there, the whole green. So we don't necessarily want each one of these boxes to take up that entire chunk. So for that reason, we're going to go ahead and give it a width of, we'll say, 33%. And when you change the width, what happens is, as opposed to occupying that entire space, it'll only now occupy a third of the line. Now, other things, excuse me, I don't like it when it touches the edge of things. Like it's touching all those things. I don't like that. So for that reason, we're going to give it two things. Margin of, we'll say, 2VH. And so margin is the space around the item. When you go and you click back, as opposed to touching the blue and the edge of this container, what it does now is it moves over, so you have just a little bit of extra space around it. Now, additionally, we're going to want to go and we're going to add some padding because that text is still touching the outside. And we'll add 2VH worth of padding as well. So you can see that now, as opposed to having the text touch the outside of the green, the box looks bigger. Now the text is now indeed not touching that. That may or may not be a good thing sometimes, and I'll show you why in just a moment. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to get a little bit more specific. So inside of our box, dot box class, we're going to want to edit the H3 that we put on there. And for this one, hello. We're going to go ahead and give that a little bit of padding. Oops, 2VH. You can try 22VH and see what happens. And we're going to give this a background color as well. And we'll put this as a maroon. And then our text color of white should make that visible enough. So when we go ahead, we click back there. I know there's a lot of clicking back and forth, but I find it really important that you actually understand. This one's a hard one to understand because it's it's just difficult to see. So now we see that this div tag, my div tag header, our H3, is red. It is white text, and it is much more looking like a header should. But now you see that since this box here has the padding, we have the green around it. If you wanted to, and I would suggest in this case that you do that, maybe that we take the padding off of box and let it be just the header so you don't see the green around it like this. And I think, to me, that's a much better look. I like that better. So now just some text definitely does not look like it should. What we're going to do is we're going to then add, for our box, dot box P for our paragraph tag. And this is, again, us getting more specific about what we're selecting. So the P is the paragraph inside of the box. And we want to go ahead and give that 2 VH worth of padding just so you can move it and align it with the stuff that's already there for our header. Then the one that's pretty new, the minimum height. What minimum height does is that it says that it can be larger than this, but not smaller. So we're going to say 6 VH for our height. And we're going to set a background color of, we'll say, salmon. So when we go back and we take a look at the effect of what that does, what should happen is our box for the text should get bigger and turn colors. And indeed, it does that. We could probably make it a little bit bigger, but in this particular demonstration, I don't think we necessarily need to do that. So then we have our div tags, and this item is grouped. So now, generally with div tag, you're not going to do just one. You're going to do multiple. So we're going to take our div box. By the way, you can use these minuses on the side to expand and collapse your code if you want to. But we're going to take our box here. We're going to put 5 more on. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you should have 6 different boxes on your screen. When you go and you preview, you should look like this. So now we have them all stacking up on top like this. There's multiple different ways that you can go and you can change the effect of how that goes. However, the one that we're going to use right now is going to be the Flexbox display. So our Flexbox, again, if you go to W3 Schools, you can see all about the Flexbox model. The Flexbox model is, I think, one of the newer and definitely one of the most powerful ways that you can go and you can change content without changing HTML. Reorder it on the screen, make it do different things. And this is particularly powerful when you're doing web design for phone screens, tablet screens, or computer screens. You have 3 different sizes that you design for. This Flexbox model makes it more possible for you to customize your code without doing a whole bunch of crazy stuff. So what we're going to do, there's a couple of things that we need to work out. Actually, we're going to be writing CSS just for one element. So dot container. Now I know that we do have a dot container up earlier. I've written a little bit of general CSS just to shape the container. What we're going to do is we're going to actually add some additional here to make our items display differently. So the first one we do is a display of flex. And then we have to tell which direction we go. If you click back over to W3, you can see that their flex container we're just calling container here. So the direction, flex direction property, you can do column or row. And what we're going to do is we already kind of have column. Column's the default, it seems. So we're going to say that our flex direction is going to be row. And let's see if that has produced the desired effect here yet. And it has indeed produced the desired effect. Now, as opposed to lining things up in a column, they are now in a row. And, of course, the power lies in the fact that if you change this to column, hopefully I spelled that right, you go back here, you refresh, and it totally changes everything the way that it's displayed. And that's why this is a modern web design tool. So row is what we want. Now, the other thing that you can get into, if we click back in W3 here, the other thing that you can do is you can tell it to wrap. So we sized our elements at 33%. However, our the flex direction has now overridden that particular property. So what we're going to do is we're going to do flex wrap of wrap. And then when we go back and we preview, what should happen is that instead of having all of them in one row, now you have just two. And there should be three, but with the margin and the padding settings, sometimes that actually doesn't necessarily work out. So if we go back into our code, and then we go and we take, instead of 33, we say we'll do 28%. When we preview, now you get actually 3, because the margin and the padding are not making it to make it larger. Now, the other thing that we have here is you see that right now the space on the left side is larger than the space on the right, and we definitely don't want that to be. So we have the next property here, which is justify content. So we're going to justify the content to the center to make sure that it lines up nice and neatly. Nobody likes to see unevenness. It adds a little bit of anxiety, tension to our website viewers that they definitely don't need. So when we go and we do that, you notice that it moves over and now it's perfectly centered. Now, additionally, you have one other property that you can set. Well, actually, you have multiple, and you can check some of those out. Generally speaking, I'm not going to use many of the other ones. I think the center is the best option. And the last one is align items. So align items is the vertical space. So justify is the left to right, vertical is the up and down. So aligning items to center will make sure that they line up in the center of your container. So we're going to go ahead and add that. And this one probably isn't going to do a whole lot on the page as we look at it, just for the simple reason that the container isn't resizing. Actually, it did do a whole lot. It took away some of the extra size that wasn't needed. So now we have exactly what we need right here. It didn't do a whole lot. It just took away a little extra size. So now our div tags are perfectly centered in the screen, and everything is as it should be. We'll definitely talk a little bit more about these particular topics, and I urge you to explore some of that stuff here. There's a lot of different options here, and it's not possible to cover all of them. However, this particular one I think is going to be very powerful in the future to make it's something that I think will be used even more extensively than it already is. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Submit your code in the assignment in Schoology, and good luck to you.